If you're familiar with Spring, you've most likely used the Spring expression language, also known as Spell. Spell is an expression language that was built to be used across all Spring products. It allows us to provide some flexible configuration options to different areas of Spring, such as our XML and annotations. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how Spell is used within the Spring Security Framework. So to begin, we're just going to make some modifications to our security context.xml file. When we look at our config file, we see some pretty basic setup here. We see the intercept URL tag being used to secure some different URLs or resources within our application. Now, when we look at the access attribute on the intercept URL, you'll notice that it's using static values. We're going to replace those static values such as role_user and role_admin with some expressions that are built into Spring Security that use the Spring expression language. In order to get started using expressions, we need to modify our configuration to allow expressions. So simply change the use expressions attribute's value to true. With that in place, we can now insert our first expression. And our first expression is going to be the HasRole expression. And we simply provide a string that is a role within our application. And within these expressions, we can use logical operators. So here we're just going to add an OR logical operator. And then we're going to specify our second role of admin. So this would equate to that constant that we had in place. Now, obviously, there is a little bit more verbiage to this, but we get a little bit more flexibility. We could add some ands in there, some nots. There's all sorts of different operators that can be used within Spell. So we get some flexibility in our configuration. Now, we have seen the HasRole built-in expression. One that is very identical to HasRole is HasAuthority. In Spring Security, when we talk about roles and authorities, they're pretty synonymous. When we are invoking the HasAuthority method within our expression language, we are pretty much calling HasRole. And if we would look into the source code for Spring Security, you will see that HasAuthority actually delegates to HasRole. So now let's look at another situation. At the bottom of our screen here, we're allowing anonymous access and the user role to access every other pattern within our application. Well, we can provide a very simple expression that will accomplish the same task, and that's the HasAnyRole. And basically, this is a short way not to specify all the ORs between our HasRole statements. So here I'm just going to add role_anonymous, and then I'm going to add the next role, which was role_user, and we'll also throw the admin role in there. So for HasAnyRole, we just provide a comma-separated list of our roles and authorities to Spring Security Framework. With our expressions in place, let's go ahead and run through our first demonstration. So I'm simply going to restart our server, and we're going to navigate to our browser, and then we're just going to attempt to sign in. So I'll sign in as our admin user, and that's kbowersocks with a password. And once our login form shows up, so kbowersocks and password. And there we see we're able to log in now. We're using those expressions that are specified within our access attribute. So let's take a look at a few more of these. So I don't advocate for this next approach, but just to demonstrate some of the capabilities, we're going to take a look at how Spring can access different objects. So we can look at the principal object that is stored within our security context holder, and I can reach in on that object and access the username. And now we'll just do a hard-coded check that the username is kbowersocks. I'll make sure I add that trailing single quote on there. And now if we run our application, we can test out that configuration. So I'm just going to log out. And once we get our sign-in page back, we can sign in. And now when we attempt to access the schedule, we are allowed because Spring Security evaluated this expression, saw that our logged in principal had a username of kbowersocks, and that allowed us access to that resource. Now let's look at one final expression. You'll notice here we're basically allowing anyone into this URL. What we can do is we can use a simple permit all, and this would be preferable because now if we come up with another user role, it's included within this expression. So it's pretty obvious permit all is going to allow everyone access. So let's restart. Once the application starts up, we can navigate to a different role. We just got to log out first once our server restarts. Okay, so now we're logged out. We're going to hit a resource that is not protected, and you see we don't have any problems, and that's because of the permit all expression. Now, I have not covered the entirety of all the expressions that are out there and built into Spring Security. But if you go to the expression-based access control of the Spring Security documentation, they're going to have a list of all of the different built-in expressions. So there we see HasRole, HasAnyRole, HasAuthority. You can pretty much surmise what HasAny authority is going to do. You provide a comma-separated list of roles or authorities which are synonymous, and it's going to authenticate it. There you see the principal object. You can also use the authentication object. We saw permit all in action, deny all. Pretty easy to infer what that's going to do. Is anonymous is similar to our role underscore anonymous we saw when we were just providing static configuration. Is remember me refers to a specific type of authentication. Is authenticated will allow any authenticated user. Is fully authenticated will not allow users that have been authenticated with remember me authentication. And then we get into these has permission built-in expressions, and they are specifically targeting when we have an ACL, so an access control list. And that's a little bit more in depth, and we'll see that later in the course. But for now, we got our first glance at the expression language that can be used to configure Spring Security, and we're going to be using this throughout the rest of our course.